Caught in a web of betrayal, I discovered my wife's emotional affair. Can I find the strength to confront her and decide the fate of our marriage? Join me on this emotional journey.
The discovery. I remember the day everything changed, a day that began like any other. I was lounging in our living room when I caught a glimpse of my wife, Sarah, deleting messages on her phone. It was such an unusual behavior for her, and my heart sank. I had to know what was happening, so I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I checked her laptop, and what I found left me in a state of shock. There it was, a sexually explicit conversation with a coworker. Not just any coworker, but a man who was married and had just welcomed a child into his life. The betrayal felt like a punch to the gut. How could she do this? I thought about our 13 years together and the 4 years of marriage that followed. We had been through so much, and yet here I was, confronted with evidence of her emotional affair. Our lives had been intertwined for so long, but in recent years, we had drifted apart. Both of us working in the demanding field of healthcare had taken a toll. Our intimacy had dwindled, and I thought it was just a phase caused by stress and exhaustion. But now I realized there were deeper issues at play. I felt a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal, and guilt. I had always been the one to take care of everything at home: cooking, cleaning, caring for our pets. Yet somehow I felt that I had pushed her to this point. As I sat there staring at the screen, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of denial. Perhaps I was overreacting? Maybe this was just a phase, a fleeting moment of weakness for her. But a part of me knew that this was different. I was wrestling with guilt and self-blame, feeling like I had somehow contributed to her infidelity. I needed to confront her, but how? And what if she gaslighted me, turning the tables and making me question my reality? In that moment, I was lost in a storm of thoughts. Should I move out? Should I file for divorce? I had no idea where to go from here. I felt trapped, entangled in a web of emotions and uncertainty. As I gathered my thoughts, I realized I had to make a choice, and it weighed heavily on my heart. Part 2. The Confrontation. A few days passed, each one heavier than the last. I emotionally checked out from our life together, and I could feel the tension building. It was only a matter of time before I had to confront Sarah. I remember sitting across from her, my heart racing and my palms sweaty, feeling the weight of everything I had discovered. When the moment finally came, I laid out everything: the texts, the betrayal, and the conversations that had left me feeling so disrespected. I pointed out her hypocrisy, how she had always accused men of cheating while she was engaging in the very behavior she condemned. Surprisingly, there was no yelling or accusations. It was more like a quiet storm brewing between us. She denied any physical involvement, but could I trust her? Her pleas echoed in my mind, begging me not to ruin their family, not to tell the other guy's wife. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, knowing that she was trying to manipulate the situation. She claimed that I hadn't made her feel desired, that she was just looking for some validation. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was minimizing what she had done. My heart ached with the realization that our intimacy had dwindled, but this wasn't the answer. While I expressed my feelings of betrayal, I could see her trying to make excuses. I was left feeling hollow, recognizing that our marriage had become a series of misunderstandings and unmet expectations. I was devastated, my mind racing with thoughts of our intertwined lives and shared friends. The thought of losing her felt unbearable, yet I knew I couldn't go on like this. As I moved out of our bedroom, seeking time and space, I couldn't help but feel like I was slipping away from the life I once knew. Days turned into nights filled with sleeplessness, and I found myself drowning in a sea of emotions. I remembered the advice of my close friend, who had urged me to seriously consider a divorce. But even as I wrestled with the idea, part of me still clung to hope. Part 3. The Aftermath. With each passing day, I felt like I was existing in a fog. One moment I was consumed with rage, and the next I felt completely numb. I had never experienced such emotional turmoil before, and it was exhausting. I found myself questioning everything, from our relationship to my own worth. How could she laugh along at the disrespectful jokes they exchanged? It was a betrayal that cut deep. Seeking solace, I turned to therapy for the first time in my life. My therapist helped me navigate the complex emotions swirling inside me, and I began to understand that I was mourning the life I thought I had.
Sarah, I was learning to confront the childhood trauma that had shaped my view of relationships and my sense of self. I wanted to heal, but I also felt a strong urge to protect myself. Sarah had been persistent in asking me to attend marriage counseling with her. After some hesitation, I agreed. I knew that our marriage was at a crossroads, and I wanted to understand if there was any way to salvage what we had. But as we sat in the therapist's office, I felt detached. I expressed my uncertainty about saving our marriage, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. Each session was filled with tension as we navigated through our feelings, and I struggled to connect. It felt like a battle of wills, her trying to prove that we could work through this while I was grappling with the reality of the betrayal. We had been together for so long, surely something had to be salvageable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that trust had been shattered beyond repair. The emotional toll of everything weighed heavily on me. I had adopted a protective shield around my heart, but with every interaction with Sarah, I felt the walls slowly crumbling. I was still wrestling with the decision to tell the other guy's wife. Morally, I knew it was the right thing to do, but I hesitated, not wanting to inflict more pain on innocent parties. Part 4. The Decision. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself caught in a cycle of reflection and confusion. I couldn't escape the feeling of being trapped in my own life. Each day felt like a battle against my own thoughts, and I was unsure if I was fighting for my marriage or my own sanity. The idea of telling the other guy's wife loomed over me like a dark cloud. I confided in my therapist about my indecision. I felt torn between wanting to protect my wife and the desire for justice for myself and the other woman. My therapist encouraged me to think about what was best for me rather than getting caught up in guilt for others. It was hard to navigate. I didn't want to be the one to ruin anyone's life, but I also knew that what Sarah had done was inexcusable. Meanwhile, Sarah seemed to be making an effort to reconnect. She tried to be affectionate, reaching out for my hand, initiating small talks, and displaying signs of wanting to mend things. But I was still traumatized by the betrayal and couldn't just forget what had happened. I felt resentful, frustrated that she could switch gears so easily. On one hand, I wanted to believe her when she said she was willing to work on our marriage, but I also felt that her actions spoke louder than words. I constantly battled with the idea that she might be deceiving me again. The emotional scars were deep, and I knew that healing would be a long process, if it were even possible. As I continued to confront my feelings, I also began to wonder if I had been naive all along. My thoughts drifted back to the way she had always accused me of cheating and the insecurity in her accusations. Had that been a guilty conscience all along? Part 5. The Breaking Point. Just as I thought I was beginning to navigate the complexities of my emotions, I hit a breaking point. I felt a mix of despair, anger, and hopelessness. My life felt like a never-ending cycle of grief and confusion. I was constantly reminded of the betrayal, and it felt as if I was drowning in a sea of despair. I struggled to find joy in anything, my work, my relationships, even the simple pleasure of spending time with my pets. I had started to isolate myself, retreating into a shell where I felt safe from the chaos that had become my life. I found myself losing interest in social events, avoiding friends, and withdrawing from the world around me. It was as if I had become a ghost, haunting the remnants of my once vibrant life. I tried to reach out for help, but the weight of my emotions felt like an anchor dragging me down. I knew I needed to talk to someone, but I was terrified of burdening them with my pain. I felt undeserving of support, as if my struggles were a result of my own failures. The thought of sharing my story with others made me feel vulnerable, and vulnerability was something I had always avoided. Then, one day, I received a message from the other guy's wife. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell her everything, but the other part hesitated. I had been mulling over this decision for weeks, and now the opportunity had presented itself. What would be the right thing to do? As I sat there, staring at my phone, I realized I had to take control of my narrative. I couldn't allow fear to dictate my actions any longer. If I wanted to heal, I had to confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I took a deep breath, ready to step into the unknown.
The path forward. With my heart pounding, I finally decided to reach out to the other guy's wife. I drafted a message, carefully choosing my words. I knew that this would likely cause a ripple effect, but I also believed it was necessary for my own healing. I couldn't keep living in this state of confusion and betrayal. I needed to reclaim my power. When I hit send, a wave of relief washed over me. I felt like I had taken a brave step toward healing. I was no longer just a passive participant in my own life. I was reclaiming my voice. I knew that this decision could change everything, but I felt a sense of clarity that had been missing for so long. In the days that followed, I focused on my own self-care. I continued my therapy sessions, exploring my feelings of anger, sadness, and betrayal. I worked on rebuilding my sense of self-worth, reminding myself that I was deserving of love and respect. I was learning to let go of the guilt I had carried for too long. Sarah and I continued our counseling sessions, and while the road ahead was uncertain, I felt a flicker of hope. There was still love between us, and we both recognized the need for growth and change. I began to open up to her about my feelings, sharing my fears and insecurities. It felt liberating to communicate openly, and I could see her trying to understand my perspective. Though the journey of healing wouldn't be easy, I was determined to find a way forward. I started to take small steps toward rediscovering joy in my life, whether it was spending more time with my pets, engaging in hobbies I had shelved, or taking long walks to clear my mind. I was learning to celebrate the small victories, no matter how insignificant they seemed. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I knew that I had the strength to rebuild my life. Whether that meant working on my marriage with Sarah or ultimately choosing a different path, I felt empowered to make decisions that were right for me. I had weathered the storm, and now it was time to embrace the possibilities of a new beginning. My heart was healing, and I was ready to face whatever came next with courage and resilience.